Hi, friends. So it's been really powerful hearing folks talk about their professional identities and the way that those identities are responded to when they talk to people over the course of last week. It's taken me a long time to put this together just because there's this whole jumble of things I want to say in response to that, and it's taken me a long time to try to pull a coherent thread out of that response. I want to say first, I have kind of conflicted feelings about my own expertise. I've sometimes joked with Emily that sometimes I feel like someone who's been trained as a priest who has since lost his faith in God. After reflecting on my experience, I'm not sure that metaphor is actually entirely accurate, but it captures the way that I feel sometimes. Anyway, I want to stress now that my conflicted feelings about my own training and position aren't meant as criticism about anyone else's training and position, even though those feelings sometimes lead me to call into question some aspects of our profession as a whole. I'm going to try to speak carefully about that, but in case I make a mistake, right, I want to emphasize that now. I think the place to start is with my own sort of weird path to where I am. My PhD, like Rachel's, is in American Culture Studies, which is basically cultural studies. I started that degree after an attempt at being a fiction writer, which basically fell apart when I realized that all I really had to say as a fiction writer was sort of gee, our current version of adult life in our culture just seems boring and sad and stilted, and I don't like it. And I kind of realized that nobody needed to hear that again from another middle-class white boy ever, forever. So I started thinking about different things that I could do. And what attracted me to cultural studies, right, coming out of that, was that a lot of the authors that form the foundation of that field, Stuart Hall, Raymond Williams, Foucault, Haraway, Latour, all these other folks, were kind of explaining, in a sense, why I felt dissatisfied. They were kind of explaining, okay, see, this is how the world has been structured by capital and power. This is why it wants you to be boring and sad, right? Let's unveil the way that this works and overthrow the property system and set people free, and things will get better, right? Of course, somewhere along the way, I started to realize that a lot of this text that we were reading was very, very old. Sure, there were new authors in the field, but it all seemed very rooted in this vision of revolution that dated to the mid 70s at the latest. So I started to look around at for some more recent versions of radical change, and basically found one in the free software, free culture movement, which I was already somewhat familiar with from my time as an undergrad computer nerd. And that was promising this new, cool, radically decentralized anti-property revolution, right? Let's make code a shared communal process and not an owned piece of property. Awesome. Let's make lots of things in culture and information not property. Awesome, right? Let's make the world cool and flexible and connected and fun. Great. That sounded great. I thought that was a great thing to try to be a part of and to study. Except, of course, it turns out it kind of wasn't, right? The free culture movement, the free software movement, kind of in a lot of ways imploded just as I got there in a couple of different ways. First, radical decentralization proved to be both hugely unstable and often just masking unacknowledged tyrannies of structurelessness, which is now my new favorite thing to diagnose in everything, especially college departments. And second, the whole thing was embedded in unacknowledged privilege that rapidly bit it in the ass. Gender privilege in particular. I wrote my dissertation on Wikipedia, which turns out to be something at least the last time we counted, an 80 to 90% male community. The scholar I probably committed to memory best was shamefully Richard Stallman. And I just have to acknowledge I was fully conscious of just skipping over the parts where he was clearly saying something creepy about a woman, and then let's just get back to the parts where he's saying cool stuff about freedom and community. Anyway, where does that leave me? Basically, as someone whose formal training is in two dead languages of revolution, right? Who now gets by as a scholar by teaching things like digital rhetoric and digital humanities and digital writing that I basically taught myself on the job in an ad hoc sort of manner. Mostly the reaction I get from strangers when I tell them I teach something like digital humanities or digital rhetoric is, what is it even is that? What does that mean? And I'm so uncomfortable at this point with my like ad hoc mastery of this that I don't even want to explain it to them. Just kind of say, oh, it's weird. Funny weather we've been having, huh? The harder conversation I have to have is with students. Most of the students who are in my classes are there because they fulfill some sort of general education requirement for the university. They very keenly want to know, why do I have to be here? What is this class about? How will it improve my future life as a sports health specialist or an accountant or a police officer or whatever it is that I want to be? And honestly, I feel most comfortable talking to them about those questions the further I am from my formal training. Right? There are lots of little tricks and methods for composing texts or doing research or writing computer programs for that matter, or doing usability testing or whatever that I've figured out for myself along the way. And I oftentimes find that when I'm having a positive interaction with a student, what's happening is I'm giving themselves advice that starts with a phrase like, well, what works for me is X, Y, and Z technique. Right. But that leaves me feeling fairly profoundly vulnerable as someone in a role that is supposedly predicated on much deeper expertise, right? Like, are my students really paying all this money for a college education just to chat with me about what works for me, right? Like, couldn't they get that from a near-peer mentor or really any caring adult? So often, I try to bring things closer to my formal expertise, right? Closer to cultural studies, closer to free software, and that never seems to go well. Students don't think it matters. They don't think it makes sense. They don't agree with the politics. It's a mess. Like, it does not go the way that I would like it to go. And I think one of the things I run into here is that what we study in the humanities, which for me is like the process by which people make this slippery thing meaning, is so broadly practiced that it's hard to claim expertise over it. Mackenzie Wark, who's a favorite scholar of mine, tweeted out something yesterday about not mistaking the crisis of the institutional humanities for a crisis of the humanities. And by this, I think she means to call our attention to all the ways in which the humanities are practiced by basically everyone, right? Not just scholars housed in humanities departments. And I think this makes our practice as teachers and scholars really hard, because when you tell someone something new about something they know nothing about, you've given them a gift. On the flip side, right? When you tell them someone that they don't understand something about a practice they've been engaged with their whole life, they get defensive, right? Don't tell me I write wrong. Don't tell me the culture I love is racist or sexist or in other ways kind of, dirty or bad. So that's really hard. But I also think this points to the opportunity for us as humanists, right? Everybody does culture. Everybody does meaning making. Everybody composes. Everybody maybe even does philosophy, right? If we can meet people where they are, if we can try to use our expertise, to use our training to solve problems for them, help them understand things they want to understand, maybe we can do this better. I'm not sure that answers some of the issues with like resistance and politics. I don't know how to answer those right now. I wonder about those a lot. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what that kind of different humanities would look like, or even if I've reached the right conclusion here. But that's where I am, friends. Tell me what you think. What do we want the humanities to look like? Like, should they look like they look like now? Should they look another way? Like, do we want them to do something different, or is it just a matter of having them perceived differently and keep doing what they're doing already? I don't know. I'm curious to hear from all of you. Anyway, it's been great to hear from you this week, and I look forward to hearing more from you soon. Take care.